Welcome to the Natural Curiosity exhibit. This is an exhibit that focuses on sort of 4 different areas related to curiosity and collections in museums. We have a component that is called A Story to Tell, where we look at sort of not necessarily spectacular specimens, they're not necessarily beautiful or amazing to look at, but the stories they tell are amazing. We have a component called Old School, where we look at how science changes over time through teaching models. So old teaching models of skulls or body parts or protozoa. Another section that we have is What Is It?, where you as the visitor get to explore individual unusual objects and discover the mystery of what they are. And then we have an exhibit that kind of focuses on where museums may have gotten their start, which is the Sideshow or the Cabinet of Curiosities. And this is where we have our really strange or unusual or outrageous specimens, kind of like our albino deer here. So we hope you enjoy our exhibit, and please take a chance to look around. One of the sections is A Story to Tell, and what we did was we picked out a small handful of specimens from our scientific collections that, while they may not be the most obvious specimen, they may not be the most beautiful, the largest, the weirdest thing we have, they each individually have a very important story and show how things change over time. And one of the ones we did pick is this lovely passenger pigeon, which is a bird that is now extinct. Went extinct in 1914. But this example was collected right here in Minneapolis in 1879. And at that time, they were starting to decline, but they had been the most populous bird in the whole world. And so even though we have all of these specimens and all these wonderful things, each single specimen has its very own story to tell. Old school is you used to sit at a desk and you listen to your teacher talk about, whatever was on the wall. But we went through our collections, and actually several collections at the University of Minnesota, and pulled out old teaching models, old teaching diagrams, used to teach science of the day. We have things like this great, rattlesnake head model that was made out of plaster, probably circa 1910, that were used to teach the science classes at the university. Even today, these same sort of models and illustrations are still being used in classes. They might be a little bit more updated, they might be plastic as opposed to plaster, or they might be done on a computer in a 3D model version, but they still have this really great science information in them. In terms of natural curiosity, we kind of use that as how people get into science. And if you work in a museum, or you take your kids to a museum, or you visit a museum, the first question that comes into everybody's brain when they see something is, what is it? We focused on a set of objects that are unusual. Maybe you don't know what it is right away, but if you think about it and you look at it and you get a little clue, maybe you can figure out what it is. We have, for this example right here, this is a giant something. And if you take a good close look at it, you would probably try and rattle it around in your brain and figure out, what is it? Kind of looks like something you might see. And then you have a little clue, comes from a tropical island, and you have a chance to flip it open and get your answer. So this thing here is a coco de mer nut. It's the largest seed in the world and comes from a palm tree. The Sideshow section is kind of our starting point, so to speak. It's where museums kind of came from. Museums were originally just these collections of either rich people or people who were trying to sell stuff to the public, like a P.T. Barnum. And so they looked for things that were unusual, so the largest, the smallest, the weirds, the freaks, all sorts of things like that. And that's what they collected and then presented to their friends or to the public. And so we sort of start with that, with our largest and smallest and killer pine cones and weird goats with 4 horns and things like that. So we sort of started there since a long time ago. That's where science museums started.